There are moments in life when pain becomes more than just a passing signal from the body. It settles in, it lingers. And no matter how many doctors we see, or how many pills we take, it doesn't leave. Maybe it's a bad knee that keeps us from walking freely. Maybe it's chronic fatigue that drapes over our days like a heavy curtain. Or maybe it's not physical at all, but a deep, aching sadness that refuses to lift. At some point, many of us have asked, why me? And perhaps even more hauntingly, what am I supposed to learn from this? St. John Paul II, who lived with the crippling effects of Parkinson's disease while guiding the Catholic Church through some of its most trying decades, believed that pain had a voice. Not a punishment, but a message. Not meaningless suffering, but a hidden invitation. He once said, "Human suffering evokes compassion. It also evokes respect, and in its own way, it intimidates." That's something you only understand with age. When you're young, pain is a problem to be fixed. But when you're older, when pain returns again and again, you begin to realize that it has something more to say. In the American culture of productivity, youth, and quick fixes, this idea is deeply countercultural. We're taught to fight pain, silence it, conquer it. But what if we listened instead? What if the body is not betraying us but trying to awaken us? This chapter isn't about resignation. It's about revelation. It's about learning to read the language of the body with the eyes of the soul. And that begins when we allow pain to become a mirror, not of what's wrong with us, but of what still longs to be healed within us. If this reflection has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments. What part spoke to you the most? Now let's continue. We often separate the body from the soul, especially when we're in pain. We say, "My back is killing me," or "My heart's just not what it used to be," as if these body parts are distant machines we're stuck inside. But St. John Paul II offered a radically different view. For him, the body wasn't just a vessel. It was a visible sign of the invisible, a sacred language through which the soul speaks and God whispers. In his theology of the body, he wrote that the body, and only the body, is capable of making visible what is invisible, the spiritual and the divine. So when your body hurts, what if it's not just a medical issue, but also a spiritual message trying to break through? Not to shame or burden you, but to awaken you. Pain forces us to slow down, to pay attention. It draws us out of distraction and into presence. That stiffness in your neck, the ache in your chest, the numbness in your fingers, what if they aren't simply symptoms, but symbols? Symbols of a life that has perhaps been overextended, overburdened, or emotionally neglected. Many Americans over 45 are entering a season of life where the body begins to talk back. Years of stress, caregiving, unresolved grief, or living for others take their toll. But what if this isn't a betrayal of the body, but its most honest cry for reconciliation? John Paul II believed that every suffering held redemptive potential. Not in a passive way, not in enduring for the sake of enduring, but in letting suffering crack open a deeper layer of truth. He modeled this himself. As his body deteriorated, he didn't hide. He let the world see his tremors, his slowness, his silence. His vulnerability became his sermon. The question then becomes, are we willing to listen to our own bodies with that same reverence? Not to analyze them like problems, but to honor them as messengers? Because maybe healing doesn't start with relief. Maybe it starts with listening. In American culture, suffering is often seen as failure. If you're not feeling good, looking good, or performing well, something must be wrong with you and it needs fixing fast. The shelves of our pharmacies are full. Self-help books promise relief. And we're constantly told to stay positive. But there's something profoundly lonely about suffering in a world that doesn't know what to do with it. St. John Paul II, shaped by war, loss, and personal illness, did not avoid this reality. He embraced it. He taught that suffering is not an interruption to life's purpose, but an expression of it. He called it redemptive suffering, the idea that pain, when willingly united with love and faith, can become a profound form of spiritual communion. That's a hard teaching, especially for those of us who've watched our bodies betray us over time. Maybe you've endured surgeries that never fully healed you. Maybe you've buried people you loved. Maybe you're caring for someone who no longer remembers your name. It's not just pain, it's grief, exhaustion, and sometimes resentment. But redemptive suffering doesn't glorify pain. It dignifies it. It doesn't say, you should suffer more. It says, your suffering has meaning and you are not alone in it. That distinction changes everything. St. John Paul II lived his final years in visible decline. He could no longer walk, speak clearly, or care for himself, yet he refused to retreat. His frailty became a living reflection of Christ's own suffering, visible, human, and strangely beautiful in its honesty. Through him, we saw that suffering could unite us more deeply with others, with God, and even with ourselves. For Americans in midlife and beyond, this concept invites a radical reframing. Instead of asking, how can I escape this pain? We begin asking, what is this pain asking of me? Who can I become through it? Because sometimes healing isn't about removing the thorn. Sometimes it's about learning to walk with it and discovering who we are when nothing is left to pretend. There's a particular kind of isolation that comes with long-term suffering. It's not just the physical discomfort, it's the feeling that no one really understands what you're going through. Friends stop asking, doctors reduce you to symptoms, even loved ones, with the best intentions, try to fix what cannot be fixed. This loneliness can feel unbearable. And yet, as St. John Paul II teaches, it's precisely in that loneliness that we begin to discover the deepest layers of our human dignity. He knew this from experience. Orphaned as a young man, injured by a truck, and later debilitated by disease, he carried physical and emotional wounds throughout his life, but he didn't let them close him off. Instead, he transformed his suffering into connection, an act of love in the face of pain. For many Americans over 45, especially those facing illness, divorce, retirement, or the slow fading of friendships, pain has become an unwelcome companion, and with it comes silence. Our culture, fast and impatient, moves on. People don't always have the time or the emotional space to sit with what hurts. So we withdraw. We stop talking about our pain, thinking we'll spare others, but in truth we begin to disappear. St. John Paul II saw the human person not as a burden to be managed, but as a mystery to be reverenced. He believed that being seen in our suffering, really seen, is a form of healing in itself. When someone looks at you and doesn't turn away from your weakness, when they stay and listen without fixing, that's where dignity is restored. We long to be witnessed, not pitied, not analyzed, but accompanied. In the Christian view, Christ didn't remove all suffering from the world. He chose to enter into it. And we're called to do the same, not only to bear our pain, but to hold space for each other's. So perhaps one of the most spiritual things we can do in our suffering is to speak it aloud, to let someone see us there, not so they can rescue us, but so we no longer have to carry it alone. Have you ever noticed that certain pains appear when you're overwhelmed, anxious, or emotionally drained? The stiff shoulders after a tense phone call, the migraine that shows up before a family gathering, the stomach knot that tightens when you're carrying unspoken resentment. We say mind-body connection almost casually, but for St. John Paul II, this relationship was sacred. To him, the body was not just affected by the soul, it expressed it. Every gesture, every illness, every sensation could hold spiritual meaning. In his view, we don't just have bodies, we are bodies, created in the image of God, holding divine messages within every ache and tremor. Think about how this changes our relationship with chronic pain. Instead of seeing it only as a biological error, we begin to ask deeper questions. What is this pain revealing about my life, my boundaries, my needs, my past? Is my body trying to express what I have not yet allowed myself to say? For many in midlife, unspoken grief is stored in the muscles. Decades of suppressed emotion accumulate in the body's quiet places. Tight hips, shallow breaths, clenched jaws. John Paul II would remind us that this is not just psychology, it's theology. The soul remembers through the body, and the path to healing begins with honoring that memory. Our American culture encourages numbing, scrolling, consuming, distracting. But sacred attention asks more of us. It asks that we pause, that we sit with the pain, gently and curiously. That we ask it, not how do I get rid of you, but what are you asking me to feel that I haven't felt yet? This kind of listening is uncomfortable, even frightening, but it's also freeing, because often the pain we carry isn't just physical, it's emotional honesty trying to break through. It's a soul that has stayed silent too long. When we begin to treat our pain not as the enemy, but as the language of the heart, we stop fighting ourselves. And in that stillness, something sacred is finally allowed to speak. When we hear the word cross, we often think of burden, punishment, or sacrifice. It evokes images of suffering we didn't choose, losses we didn't want, or responsibilities that feel too heavy. For many Americans in midlife and beyond, the cross may look like caregiving for an aging parent, facing a chronic illness, mourning a child who has drifted away emotionally, or dealing with the slow erosion of one's own strength and independence. But for St. John Paul II, the cross was not simply a symbol of suffering, it was the doorway to love. He often returned to the idea that Christ did not eliminate suffering, he entered into it and filled it with meaning. That's a radical shift. It means that what you're carrying today, your pain, your weariness, your questions, may not be a detour. It may be the path itself. A path that leads not to despair but to deeper union with God, others, and your truest self. This isn't about glorifying pain. It's about refusing to let it define you as broken or forgotten. In the eyes of John Paul II, carrying a cross meant participating in something larger than yourself, something profoundly spiritual and redemptive. The cross, then, is not a curse, but a companion. It walks with you, reshapes you, slows you down until you begin to notice things you never did before. The way your breath changes when you pray in silence, the deep gratitude for a friend who truly listens, the hidden strength that rises in you when you thought you had none left. In a culture obsessed with comfort and control, this message is deeply countercultural. But to those who are tired, wounded, or alone, it is a balm. It says you are not failing, you are being transformed. We do not carry our crosses alone. Just as Christ fell and rose again, we too will be lifted, if not in body, then in spirit. And often that rising begins the moment we stop asking, "Why me?" and begin whispering, "Show me." As the years pass, the body softens, slows, and sometimes fails us. For many, this brings fear of dependency, irrelevance, invisibility. In a society like America's, where youth is idolized and aging is resisted at every turn, growing older can feel like fading out. But to St. John Paul II, aging was not a diminishment, it was a deepening. He often spoke of aging as a time when the soul begins to speak more clearly, because the distractions of earlier life begin to fall away. Career ambitions, social status, financial achievements, these once demanded our energy and attention. But as they lose their grip, something more essential is revealed. Our need to love, to be loved, and to make peace with who we truly are. Pain often accompanies this season, not just physical, but emotional. Regrets surface, relationships shift. And yet, in this sacred space of slowing down, something extraordinary can happen. The soul awakens. With fewer masks to maintain, we begin to ask the deeper questions. Who have I become? What have I not yet said? Where do I still need healing? St. John Paul II, even in his visible frailty, radiated this wisdom. His aging was public and unapologetic. He showed us that even when the body bends, the spirit can rise. That dignity is not found in perfection, but in presence. That love does not retreat when strength fades, it deepens. For those in midlife and beyond, this offers not just comfort, but purpose. You are not being pushed to the margins of life, you are being called to its center. This is not the end of your spiritual journey, it may be its most powerful chapter. What if aging isn't the slow fading of your light, but the clearing away of everything that once blocked it? What if your pain is not the sign of being worn out, but the signal that your soul is finally ready to be fully known? This is not decline, it is awakening, and it asks only one thing, that we stay present enough to feel it. There's a moment, often in the quiet of the night or in the stillness after pain has surged, when a deeper voice within begins to whisper, not in words, but in knowing. It says, "You are still here. You are still becoming," and that alone can be enough to carry us through. St. John Paul II never promised that suffering would go away, but he did promise it could be transformed. That through it, we could draw closer to something eternal, something that outlasts the pain, the body, even time itself. In your life right now, you may be living with wounds that no one sees. Maybe your body is tired. Maybe your heart is heavy with years of unspoken sorrow. Maybe you feel forgotten in a culture that moves too fast. But hear this truth: your suffering is not meaningless. It is not wasted. It is sacred ground. The American way often tells us to keep going, to push through, to stay strong at all costs. But perhaps true strength lies not in pushing, but in stopping, in listening, in surrendering, and in allowing ourselves to receive the grace hidden within our pain. This final message from St. John Paul II is not about theology alone. It's about lived human experience. He showed us that the soul does not shrink with the body, that weakness does not destroy dignity, and that even when speech is lost and movement is limited, the heart can still speak powerfully through presence, through humility, through love. So what now? Now you treat your pain with reverence. Now you stop apologizing for your slowness, your sadness, your sensitivity. Now you allow your body to speak, and you listen with compassion. And perhaps most of all, now you realize you are not alone in this. There is meaning here, there is presence here, and there is a God who does not remove suffering, but enters into it with you, offering not always a cure, but always a companion. Let your pain be a teacher. Let it shape you, not into someone smaller, but into someone more whole. This is not the end. It is the sacred unfolding of your truest self. Acceptance is often misunderstood. People think it means giving up or giving in. But St. John Paul II saw acceptance not as surrender, but as strength, a spiritual act of courage that requires deep trust. To accept pain does not mean we like it. It means we stop fighting against reality with bitterness. It means we choose to meet life as it is, not as we wish it to be. This kind of acceptance opens a door to peace, to clarity, and to grace. When John Paul II could no longer speak, when his body trembled and betrayed him, he didn't hide. He remained visible, present. In that silence, he communicated something louder than words. That being is enough, that our value does not disappear with our abilities, that even in our most fragile state, we are worthy of love. For many over 45, this truth comes slowly. It might arrive after the diagnosis, after the loss, after the silence. But when it arrives, it frees us. We stop needing to prove ourselves. We begin to live from the inside out. In the American mindset of performance and independence, acceptance is radical. It says, I can be with this pain and still live fully. It says, I am not less because I am hurting. And it gently whispers, this moment is holy too. Acceptance is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a different kind of strength. The strength to be real, to be open, and to be whole even when nothing feels certain. So breathe. Rest your hand over the place that hurts. And know, even now, even here, you are deeply seen.